All right, welcome to The Explainer. We're diving into a really tough but super important topic today. We're going to look directly at the data behind adolescent suicide to try and understand its true causes and, more importantly, find solutions that actually work.
For so long, the conversation has been centered on academic pressure, right? But what if we've been focusing on the wrong problem all this time? What if avoiding the uncomfortable truths is just making things worse?
The material we're digging into today really pushes us to get past the common myths, to look at what the evidence is actually telling us. Okay, so let's get into it. First up, we're going to challenge this really popular belief about what's driving this crisis. And then we'll get into what the official statistics say are the real primary causes. So right off the bat, data from Taiwan's official suicide reporting system paints a really clear and maybe surprising picture. The top 3 factors are mental health issues, emotional and relationship problems, and family issues. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When we look at the detailed breakdown, academic pressure, well, it's on the list, but it ranks significantly lower than those top 3. The big takeaway here is that by blaming schoolwork, we might have been completely misidentifying the main problem, and that means our efforts to help could be misplaced. Okay, so if mental health is the #1 issue, what's the solution? Well, it looks like it's a 2-part answer. We need immediate medical support, for sure, but we also need to build a deeper, more fundamental psychological resilience.
Yeah, just let that number sink in for a second. 40 to 45%. That is a massive number. It's practically screaming that we need accessible professional medical and counseling services. The data shows the vast majority of these cases are directly tied to depression, which means medical help isn't just an option, it's an absolutely essential part of the solution.
But here's the thing. While medicine can treat the symptoms, it doesn't always get to the root cause, which can be this deeper crisis of meaning. So where do we find that? Well, a major international study gives us a really fascinating clue. So check this out. This study found a pretty remarkable distinction. Now, we have to be super clear. When the study says social conservatism, it's not talking about a political party. It's defining it as a psychological trait, basically a preference for stability and a resistance to rapid change. And what it found was that this trait correlated more strongly with a sense of meaning in life, even after they controlled for religion. And this right here gets to the heart of the psychology. The researchers suggest that it's this basic human need for stability and coherence, for our world to make sense, that really builds a sense of meaning. This points to a powerful, long-term preventative measure, helping teens build a stable personal value system, maybe through something like philosophical education, giving them the tools to forge their own coherent worldview. Now let's tackle that second leading cause, the huge impact of our emotional and interpersonal relationships. And this is where the data shows a significant gender difference that we just can't afford to ignore if we want to help. So this category is another huge piece of the puzzle, and the source material is very direct here. To create protections that actually work, we have to acknowledge that when it comes to conflicts in emotional relationships, young women are disproportionately affected. The sources argue pretty strongly that pretending males and females are exactly the same in how they process these deep emotional bonds actually stops us from creating the targeted support that's so desperately needed. Facing this reality is the first step to taking effective action. So the solution proposed is a really specific curriculum. It's about giving young people, and especially girls, a practical toolkit: how to identify your emotions, how to set boundaries, how to recognize manipulation, and how to build a sense of self-worth that isn't dependent on a relationship. And it goes beyond just education. The source also calls for concrete legal and facility-based protections. This means policies that recognize these real-world risks and includes things like legally protecting single-sex spaces, like dorms and restrooms, which are identified as important protective factors. All right, on to the third critical piece of this puzzle, the role of the family. For most young people, this is their primary support system, their first line of defense. But this statistic shows that for a huge number of kids, that support system is strained or even broken. And when that happens, an external, really robust support system becomes absolutely essential. The solution proposed here is to systematically beef up the social welfare system. And that's not just an abstract idea. It means more social workers on the ground, funding mediation programs for families in conflict, and creating early warning systems to step in before a situation becomes a crisis. It's about building a real safety net to catch people. Okay, so after looking at all that data and the proposed solutions, what are the most important things to walk away with from this explainer? The bottom line is this: our strategy has to be guided by evidence, not by assumptions. That means we need to redefine the problem, shifting resources to where they're needed most. It means we have to acknowledge real-world differences to provide better protection. And it means investing in deeper, systemic solutions that build resilience from the inside out. Facing these truths is the first and probably the hardest step. The next is deciding what we're going to do with this knowledge. How do we turn all this data into action that will protect the next generation? That's the question we're left with.